Good morning. It's practically dogma in British Columbia that we all love the Conservative government, but we're a little bit doubtful about the record in encouraging jobs and employment on the west coast of Canada. We don't like being the area with the second highest rate of unemployment. It may be partly our own fault. But here this morning, also to be questioned about some abuses of our immigration policies, I trust, is the Honourable Flora MacDonald, the Minister for Employment and Immigration in the Mulroney government. And then for further good news later in the programme, a man who I'm sure will be positive about the future, I have Adam Zimmerman, President and Chief Executive Officer of Noranda, small company that employs 30 or 40,000 people and a couple of score of plants across Canada. He also is the top man in Macmillan Bloedel. But we'll start to question the Honourable Flora MacDonald first after the break. Flora MacDonald is Minister of Employment and Immigration. We don't like, as you know, having 205,000 unemployment and the second highest rate, 14% unemployment in the country. We're just one below Newfoundland. And yet things are so good in Ontario. In Ontario and central Canada, you've only got between 7 and 8% unemployment. Right. Why have you not done major things to help the situation in British Columbia, where we've had more bankruptcies and disasters than we can care to think about?
It's true, Jack, that the recovery has taken off first in Ontario and Quebec.
Is there a recovery on the way?
Certainly there's a recovery on the way, and I can see it every day in the figures, the statistics that come out. On the other hand, there is some marginal decrease in unemployment in this province. It's only marginal, and I think it's only beginning. But that's the reason why we have moved in my area, in the area where I'm responsible, for putting into effect programs which will tackle the hardcore unemployment. I can't provide jobs for everyone, but the government has a responsibility toward those who are long-term unemployed, or toward those particularly young people who are dropouts from high school, where the unemployment rate is highest. And those are the people that we're bringing back in, putting them back into school and providing them with work experience at the same time.
20% of our unemployed are under 25 now.
Right.
I may just have missed the whole thing, but tell me what I can do today if I'm under 25, unemployed, and Flora says, I'm going to put you back to school. Where do I go, what do I do, and what do you give me?
Well, first of all, I'd tell them to go to the nearest Canada Employment Centre. We've already approved 40 projects for young people in this province that are putting them allowing them to upgrade their academic skills, but at the same time, working with private enterprise, working with firms, putting them out into firms where they get an actual job experience.
Is this a winter works program of some kind?
No, it's not a winter works program in the old way. The projects can last for up to 52 weeks. And what it does is provide that young person with training and skills that they didn't have before, so that they really have some marketable commodity.
Okay, 40 projects. How many jobs are these new projects, or are they ongoing at the moment? And how many jobs in these 40 projects?
Well, let's look at those 40 projects. They themselves provide something like 1,500 jobs for young people, training and jobs, so that they can look forward to permanent employment. But that's one of 6 streams. There's another stream that's devoted toward long-term older unemployed, a stream that's devoted to women who are coming back into the workforce after being away from it for many years. There are programs that are directed to people who are already employed, but whose jobs may be threatened because of changing technology, and we want to retrain them before they're laid off. So what we're doing is looking at targeted groups and assisting them.
But don't you think it's time your government did something in a major way? We've got a fairly lackluster government in Victoria, I don't mind telling you, that relies on the Coquihalla, which I welcome, on BC Place a little bit, and Expo. But with 205,000 unemployed and a a very pessimistic spirit in British Columbia. More than this, should you not be encouraging your government to prime the pump in a big way for the winter of our discontent? We've lost 20,000 jobs in the logging industry.
Now, wait a moment, Jack, let me get a word in.
Oh. I'm just making my point.
Yeah, I understand.
You know, I like
that.
all these little training schemes, but we don't see them.
Jack, first of all, if you don't realize that we're going through major change and have to have people trained for the future, then, you know, you're really out of it. But in addition to that, I think you'll know that the government has signed a $525 million IRTA agreement with the government of British Columbia in major areas of forestry, of agriculture, of fisheries, and those projects will be carried out by other departments of government over the next 5 years. You see, my responsibility as Minister of Employment is really to help train the human resources to go into the jobs that will be created by other departments.
You're going to upgrade skills and give opportunities. We can't look to you for any major job creation.
No, that's not the responsibility of the Department of Employment. Ours is to get the people ready to take the jobs that become available through the other, whether it's in primary industries or secondary industry or tertiary industry. People going into the service sector, people going into the financial sector. That's where many of the new jobs are being created, in small business.
But aren't you unhappy that your government, apart from giving, say, subsidies to uneconomic operations like Cypress Anvil in the Yukon, hasn't been able to do anything finite for us?
Well, now, wait a moment.
Maybe we're asking too much from a Tory government.
Well, I think that when you look at the kinds of projects that I've been looking at in the last few days in Kitimat and in Terrace and in some parts of northern British Columbia, where the accent is being put on silviculture, on that aspect of forestry, which is the future development of forestry.
But we were very disappointed in the amount of money allocated to forestry by social credit and the Conservative government, and the logging companies too.
Well, Jack, it was 5 times larger than any IRTA agreement ever signed before. Now, I'm not sure how much you expect in one single agreement.
Anyway, we can look to you for technical trades training, encouragement, and work in the free enterprise sector in which you'll subsidize the employers.
And what I'm doing is encouraging the private sector to offer the training places, to ensure that the private sector says, look, these are the courses that are needed. See, for so long, people were put through what they called manpower training courses without any idea if that was going to provide them with the criteria, the skills they need to go into the labor force. There was no guarantee of a job at the end of it. What we're doing is trying to match the training to the jobs, to the labor market needs.
Meanwhile, you administer UIC, don't you?
Yes.
What will the deficit be on UIC this year? 4, 5 billion?
About $4 billion. Altogether, there will be an expenditure of some $11 billion this year, and it's one of the reasons that I have set up a commission of inquiry to take the first full overview of unemployment insurance since 1970.
Jack Monroe is on that one.
Yes, Jack Monroe is working with half a dozen other people on the commission. Jack coming from British Columbia here, Roy Bennett, who was the former president of Ford Motor Company of Canada. We have a half dozen people who are really devoting their time to this. And you have
been fairly tough in making it a little more difficult to get your UIC, have you not? What are the payments which must now be included before you draw your UIC?
Well, we are saying that any payments that are payable when you leave your job, whether that is severance pay or vacation pay or pensions, must come under compiling your income for purposes of unemployment insurance. Those must be included as income before you are able to get unemployment insurance.
You always had to spend your vacation pay before you drew your UIC.
No, you could draw it at the same time that you were drawing unemployment insurance. Now you have to finish using it up.
You have to use up your vacation pay, your severance pay,
right,
and your pension payments.
Beginning the 1st of January, if you receive a pension that is counted as income. It wasn't before.
You mean a total pension sum
Right.
repaid to you?
No, your ongoing pension.
If you get a pension, say of, well, of course, if you get a pension, say of $80 a week after partial contribution.
Right.
That comes off your UIC.
That's right. You can get up to 25% of your pensionable earnings in unemployment insurance, but that's the limit.
In other words, but if you get a repayment of RRSP money, you don't touch that, do you?
The RRSP, all of these are looked upon as income.
So that's quite hard. That's much tougher than the Liberals did. And you did that
Well, yes,
because
but
of
it
the
was-
national economy.
Well, it was, you know, you've got to see what you regard as insurance. I mean, insurance is quite different from income.
You hardly take the attitude that MacDonald Royal Commission takes of really using that kind of payment as a guaranteed income for everyone.
Oh, no. These changes in regulations had been put into effect a year ago at the time of Mr. Wilson's economic statement. Since then, I've set up the Commission of Inquiry, and they have to report back to me by the end of March of next year. What recommendations they make will be looking at the total unemployment insurance program. And I'm not sure what their recommendations will be, whether they go the route of the MacDonald Commission, whether they go some other route. I'll be waiting, like all Canadians, to see that.
You have no special hope, though, for the under-25s, except that you're going to do as much as you can to feed some of them into your special
Jack,
education and working
Last summer, we had a program for young people. And it involves some 11,000 young people here in British Columbia under the Challenge 85 program. These were students who were looking for work during the summer. Of those 11,000 jobs, 70% of them were related to their careers. We helped them go into, whether it was broadcasting or to the pharmaceutical industry or accounting firms or whatever, that were related to their studies back in the university. That's the kind of thing we're trying to do, further the young person's career. And whether it's a person in university or someone who has dropped out of high school, we're trying to get them to upgrade their skills so that they're of more benefit to themselves and to the labor market generally.
Next segment of the program, I'm going to ask Mrs. MacDonald quite bluntly if now is not the time to stop immigration because of the mass unemployment in British Columbia. After the break. The Honourable Flora MacDonald is, of course, Minister of Employment and Immigration in the Mulroney government. And in a very soft voice, excuse my throat, let me note that you're putting up your immigrants this year from $95,000 to $115,000. And no matter, Madam Minister, what you tell me about the dropping birth rate, there are many unemployed Canadians of all races, colours and creeds out there who say, forgive me again, what the hell is going on? These people must come in. Many of them go on welfare when they're landed. Yes, they do, ma'am. Why don't we have, I put to you, pause in immigration until we get somewhere closer to full employment?
Jack, we've had
15% in British Columbia, 14.3%.
Jack, we've had a very low limit of immigration in the last few years. One of the things that people often forget is that we have between 55 and 60,000 people leave the country every year, go elsewhere in the world, many to the United States. So our net immigration has really been very low in the last number of years. But two things. One, I don't think you have any proof, because I haven't been able to find it anywhere, that people coming into the country as immigrants take jobs away from people who are here. Secondly, people coming in who need food, shelter, clothing, and so on, create a demand which create more jobs. And I don't think that the numbers by which we have increased immigration this year are really going to cause any major significant...
So therefore, you reject the emotional argument that an immigrant takes my job.
Yeah, I do indeed. And not only that, I think that we have proven over the years in the history of this country, as a country of immigrants, that that's the strength that we build on.
What about the current abuses in immigration, as pointed out by the Auditor General Dye, not once but twice now, about the rackets in immigration? What have you done to stop the racket of courier parents?
Well, Jack, I'm sure that there are people who can always say there are abuses in immigration. What I think is important in this field is that we handle it sensitively, that we handle it tolerantly, and that we continue the normal welcome that we have always given to immigrants. I don't think that you suddenly introduce a police mentality and say everybody who is coming into this country is somehow, less than wanted.
There is no more nervous Nelly or nice Nelly than me on the subject of immigration. Courier parents, however, applies to your family unification program, where the Liberals in 1978 changed the age of parents who could be brought in from 60 to 40.
Well, it's been changed again. It's back up to 60.
When was it changed up to 60?
In 1982.
Are you sure it's up to 60 now?
It's people in the family reunification category.
But we must finish that first, my dear,
Right.
because, said my dear to a minister, Mrs. MacDonald, because we're an immigrant brought in his mother and father and brothers and sisters as a matter of right.
Yeah.
In 50% of the cases, the parents found the culture shock too much and went back to whence they came. You're aware of that?
Many have gone back
50%,
to a number of countries.
So
But
therefore, family unification was a bit of a phony in all those cases.
no, I don't think family reunification has been the basis of Canada's immigration policy since we started as a country. And
In such numbers, no, not.
Yes, indeed. That's been the mainstream of where people came here because their relatives and their friends, whether it was from Europe or from Asia or from Scotland, they came because their families were here. Now, let me just say, though, that in 1982, the regulations were changed, and family reunification were direct members of family, below the ages of 21 and over the ages of 60. And that's the way it remains today. In the new regulations that come into effect the first of the year, assisted family relatives can come, that is, brothers and sisters, provided that they're able to show that they have a contribution to make as an independent, as someone coming here wanting to set up, to be involved in business, to want to take on some of the responsibilities of contributing to the Canadian economy.
Let me understand you. You're telling me, Madam Minister, that you have now tightened up the family unification class.
The family unification class was tightened up in 1982.
And you're telling me that if I bring in my mother and father, I can only bring in my brothers and sisters if they are able to make a contribution to this country?
What we have done is, up until now, they could only come if they had a job waiting for them.
Not in family unification.
Yes, for brothers and sisters between the ages of 21 and 60, that's the way it was. That requirement is no longer there. That has loosened the restrictions that were placed on in 1982. And you will get a certain number of bonus points because you are what we call assisted family relatives. That will allow brothers and sisters more access than they have had since 1982.
Are we bringing in a significant portion, said he quoting Dye, of family class immigrants who cannot fit into the country?
Well, I have seen many who have come from many parts of the country who are looked after by their families. That has always, too, been a way of life in Canada, that their older parents are looked after by the families already established. So I don't take that as a necessary, that people are coming here at the age of 60 or 65 just to rely on what might be the Canadian welfare system.
Well, I must admit, you have not spelled this out to people in my business or anyone else who the impression is that family class unification is a simple way to open a door to bring in mothers and fathers' children, fiancés, mothers and fathers' children, endlessly, putting, as the Auditor General says, considerable weight on the social services and the other facilities in this country. Now, that's a commonly held belief. Can you dispel it?
Jack, if you were to take the figures of the numbers of people who have come into this country in the last number of years, 4 million people since the end of the Second World War, and they have encouraged their families to come here from whatever country of the world, and they have been the basis of much of the economic development of Canada.
What are you going to do to clear up two things? The entrepreneur caper, where people come in and don't have to account for themselves and sometimes can't be found by the Immigration Department, and the refugee staggering load of appeals.
Well, 2 points. First of all, you say the entrepreneur caper. We have tried to bring back into some balance the business immigrant to this country. They were the ones who were most restricted by the 1982 regulations. And so entrepreneurs this year have increased from 2,000 to 4,000 out of the 115,000 overall limits.
They're the people with $250,000 can flash a check and enter the country.
Well, I'm not sure that it's just that simple. They have to have a proven track record in business. And what we're talking about is about 4% of the overall numbers coming to the country. The refugee situation is a much, much larger question. And this has been examined now in depth by Rabbi Plaut, who had done a study commissioned by the previous government and which he gave to me. There are two aspects of it. One is the refugee determination process itself. At the moment, everybody who's involved in this admits that it is too lengthy, that it drags on, that it goes through innumerable reviews, and nobody knows where they stand during that period. It's taking 4 to 5 years at this point for anyone to determine whether or not they're a genuine refugee.
And many are bogus, we know that.
Well, a number going through the process are declared not to be refugees and are then sent back. In fact, only about a third who go through the process are proven to be genuine refugees. So the other 2/3...
And you've got 16,000.
In a backlog.
Yeah.
Yes, certainly that number, probably higher. And that is the other aspect of the dilemma before us, how to handle that backlog expeditiously. Some people say give a total amnesty.
Amnesty.
Well,
why not? Liberals always gave Liberals allowed these messes to build up and then said give amnesty. Will you do the same?
Certainly, I am coming in with recommendations early in the new year as to what happens both to the process and to the backlog. But I can tell you, there haven't been that much pressure for a total amnesty from the number of people that I've talked to. We'd have to look at that backlog very sensitively, find out which countries would in fact make it dangerous for people to return there. So, we're looking at the whole spectrum, but a total amnesty is not certainly the first priority.
Fair enough. There's one little thing in the Equality for All report I must draw your attention to. You know the parliamentary report?
Yes, I also know the legislation I'm putting through at the moment.
Are you going to include in the legislation their recommendation that common law relationships should count as a solid basis for bringing in a person into this country as a, quote, common law wife or husband?
Well, Jack, the Minister of Justice has to respond to the Equality for All. I'm not ducking that, but you see, it's not my...
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
It's not my responsibility on that. I do want to tell you, though, that what I am bringing in is employment equity legislation, which will apply to women, to minority groups, and will make sure that in those industries which are federally regulated, like banking and transportation and communications, that there are equal opportunities for those groups. That includes broadcasting.
Well, if anybody can do my job, they can have it.
We wouldn't want to lose you.
Let's go take some phone calls to Flora MacDonald, Minister of Immigration and Employment. Take it. Well, how are you enjoying it? We're back on the air again. Your government has been through some turbulent times since you took power, has it not? Are you now in a smooth sea, calm sea?
Yes, I know that there have been certain things that have been highlighted. On the other hand, Jack, what I find is that overall in the country, unemployment is down, employment is up, interest rates are down, investment is up. There are some very major economic factors that are improving. And I think that when you are able to see significant gains in these big fields, then there's something to be pleased about. Not that it's the end, but the trend is the right way.
Well, I must admit, we in British Columbia, despite the glories of Expo to come, tend to be kind of myopic at the moment. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier about an older program for long-term unemployed. What are the details on that?
This is what we call the Job Development Program. And it allows people to come into jobs, as I saw yesterday, say in Terrace. They come into training, to take one example, they come into training in silviculture. People who'd been in forestry, one man who was 54 said, I've been involved in the forestry industry all my life. This is the first time I've ever learned why I'm doing it or what I can do to help the forests of the second generation, beyond virgin timber. And he said, this is a great training experience for me. And then I go out with companies, and put that into actual work experience. So he sees the last number of years in the labor force as being much more productive.
Is he working for a private company or a government operation?
He will be working with a private company, but his training is in Northwest College in Terrace, which is one of the community colleges.
What's your trade collar?
Engineer's technician, but there's nothing down here.
Well,
I was trying to get back into VVC, but the waiting period there to get into the course is a year to a year and a half, and if you're on UIC, which I am now, they'll continue through. If you join the course, they'll carry right through, even if it does expire. But if you're looking at a year and a half to get into the basic course.
Well, I would urge you to keep in touch with the Canada Employment Centre because there are new projects opening up all the time. For instance, in certain areas, I'm not sure just what part of the province, but we're training people in the broadcasting field, we're training them in high technology, we're training them in pharmaceutical industries. It's a variety of things.
Thank you, sir. Just a minute. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, good morning, Jack, Ms. MacDonald.
Good morning.
I've just, in regards to your portfolio, I'm wondering what your reaction is to your government, and I wonder how much input you had to the sale of de Havilland to Boeing. I'm listening to reports out of New York now. The Wall Street analysts are saying that Boeing purchased that de Havilland plant at a song. They're saying they got it for a song, and the workers in Downsview, Ontario are concerned. I'm just wondering how you, as a cabinet minister, sitting around that table, in your own mind, knowing what your views are, you can justify the sale of that de Havilland plant at such a cheap fire sale rate, where the last year the Canadian government, the people of Canada, plowed in $750 million to develop made-in-Canada technology, and now we've sold it to a multinational, basically giving it away. The analysts on Wall Street, the aerospace and the aircraft analysts are just roaring at this one. I mean, they skinned us alive, and if your government is going to go into free trade talks with that sort of a mindset, we're just giving this country away at fire sale prices.
One of the things we were doing was considering the jobs of Canadian workers. In the last number of years, the federal government has put $700 million worth of the taxpayers' money into that. It's true. But the future was that they were going to have to put another $200 million in the next year. And the question was, where's the $200 million coming from to go to de Havilland when it's not coming here to British Columbia and other industries and so on?
It begs the question then, where did the $3.2 billion come from to bail out the uninsured depositors in the CCB and the Northland Bank? I mean,
well, what we wanted to make sure was that de Havilland indeed did keep going in Toronto, in Ontario. And with the sale price that was offered, I can tell you it was by far the best price that was able to be acquired anywhere.
Mind you, she has a very good point. He had a very good point on the billions it cost us to bail out mystery investors. We never knew their names in CCB and the Northland Bank. That's $2 billion alone. Cash.
Well, Jack, would you have said that should not be done for investors who were by and large living in Western Canada?
Well, many of them were foreign banks. I would have said cover it up to CDIC level and let the rest suffer.
We're talking about credit unions, we're talking about church organizations, we're talking about teachers in Western Canada. Those were the people who were by and large
either them or the
depositors.
taxpayers. I would have let them go down the drain.
It would have also had a very major negative impact on the economy of Western Canada.
I don't think it was that much Western Canada, those things. I think there were many investments from many places.
You ask through the prairies the number of organizations which held investments in those banks.
Go ahead, please.
Hello, Ms. MacDonald. I understand that it's quite essential to develop programs for youth and women and minorities and the handicapped in the country, but for the last 10 years or so, there hasn't been many programs developed to people there in my situation, where I'm above 25 years old. I'm a 30-year-old male with not a whole lot of training. I've had a lot of jobs. I've been here 6 years, and I've had about 15 different jobs, and I've done well at most of them, but they've ended for whatever reason. And I don't see many programs in the Canadian Job Strategy devoted that way. There's the skill shortage list, but you take a look at that list, and every occupation on there, I can't believe that there's shortages in it. There's welders listed on that list, and I know welders that are out of work. Hundreds of welders from all across the country that are out of work. So I don't know. I think it's a scam. The skill shortage. It's just not true.
There are areas, there are certain categories of jobs where there are shortages.
Well,
and we have to be sure to train people in these categories in order to provide the necessary linkages. I mean, firms are asking all the time to have additional workers in such and such a trade. We're trying to meet those. Bricklayers.
But those people are out there. The welders are out there. Bricklayers are out there. They're out of work right now. And so how can you put these occupations on the skill shortage list?
Well, because
I mean, it doesn't make sense. There are a lot of other people that are unemployed out there that need these jobs. And so why train more to have a glutton in that field?
There are a number of parts of the country where indeed there are shortages in these skills. And when you put out a list, you cannot put it out for every single city right across the country. We try to come to grips with those skills where there are shortages in various parts of the country. But for your own situation, there are several areas where you yourself could enter. Skill shortages were one. But the whole job development program, which is the biggest program, is another where you could go and qualify.
More with Flora MacDonald after the break. Flora MacDonald is Minister of Employment and Immigration. Go ahead, please.
Yes, good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Flora. Good morning, Jack.
Good morning.
By the way, do you notice, Flora, that all the calls are men? They're all male unemployed in British Columbia.
Am I on, Jack?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Jack, this is direct a question to Flora. I had been corresponding with the MPs out of Ottawa.
What's the point?
Provincial government.
What's the point?
Hello?
What's the point?
The point is creating jobs in the forest section.
What's your question?
The question is we would like to utilize our forest to the fullest capacity. That is, we have so much timber that's laying down, vacant timber, and I've been a logging contractor for some 30 years.
Well, I'm afraid I haven't got time to make it a question or I'll cut you off.
The point is to utilize our forest to the fullest capacity, making press boards.
I'm afraid the Minister, you can't get into technical details of what we're going to do in the forest industry.
Well, I can.
He's a very nice guy, but he's far too windy and I've got to get rid of him. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'd like to talk about immigration. I had a nephew and his wife wanted to come out 2 years ago. She was a legal secretary and he had a good job. We had plenty of accommodation, no problems, and they were turned down. Then there was four Iranians arrived in Vancouver a few weeks ago. They didn't like where they were staying, so they were wanting to move to a better accommodation. And my nephew and his wife were turned down.
Well, this is a straight question with a tinge of problem in it, because people always say that if you're white from Scotland or England, over 21, have a skill and no job, it's impossible to get into Canada. But if you have family reunification from anywhere else, you can come in by the score. That's what people say, and there is some accuracy in it.
Well, let me just answer the lady's concerns. First of all, 25% of our immigration last year came from Europe. And so there were a number of people who came from from Great Britain, from other European countries. But in the changes that we have made to the immigration levels in the coming year, family reunification has remained at the same forecast. Humanitarian or refugee immigration has remained at the same forecast. Where the increase is in the independent category, in the economic category, which was the one that had been most restricted in 1982. And so that's the area where you see the most opening. That is people who want to come to Canada, to invest in Canada, to help contribute to Canada, to develop Canada on their own.
This is what you always say, but it doesn't turn out like that.
Well, in fact, the levels have just been increased only 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Well,
that
I was
didn't
watching
happen.
the journal on that program, and if you looked in the audience, everyone was Pakistani, Asians, you name it. There wasn't one white Canadian there.
Yes,
only
there
one
was.
person.
There were many.
Young gentleman got up to say his point about what you're bringing in. He got turned down, and you were sat there like a dodo.
Ma'am, that was an edited program, and we have no total idea of what happened within that particular CBC General program, because it wasn't all shown on the air. So
No, that's very true.
that's one of the problems with CBC programs. They get edited with the best of intentions, but they do come out in different forms on occasion. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack, good morning.
Yes.
I'd just like to ask Miss MacDonald a simple question. When and where? She keeps giving us all these generalities about how things are looking up in unemployment. Well, I've been out here. I've been unemployed 2 years. You know, she keeps telling us that everything is looking rosy. I watch Question Period
I'm not saying that it's
TV
all
every
looking
day.
rosy.
And, you know, I bet you it's all happening in Ontario, Quebec, but nothing out west here for us. I'll hang up and listen. Thanks.
I have not said that it's all looking rosy, and I have said that British Columbia has come through a very tough time. Nobody is denying that. What we are trying to do is to put into effect programs that will help ameliorate the situation, that provide people with training for jobs that will be required in the future. See, that we're putting $70 million this year, this winter, from my own department into training and employment opportunities in British Columbia. We're doing that because we know the extent of the difficulty here, not because we're trying to run away from it or hide it or camouflage it.
Go ahead from Castlegar.
Yeah, Mrs. MacDonald, all these programs you've got for new job training and all this, what about us poor people who aren't, some of us aren't suited for some of these, like broadcasting, say, and the others, like I've got a trade certificate and I'm educated, a university diploma, and I can't find jobs in my vocations.
What's your trade?
I'm a certified carpenter.
How long have you been out of work?
For almost 3 years now.
Are you a union member?
Pardon me?
Have you got a withdrawal card?
No, I'm a union member. I'm still in the union.
Kept up your dues, and you haven't had a work job for 3 years.
Yeah, almost 3 years.
Well, this is why the program, Job Development, is directed to long-term unemployed. And it's not just, I was mentioning to Jack about broadcasting, it's not just in that field. The projects that I was talking about are primarily in fisheries, in forestry, in construction, in areas where people can come from being, they have to be out of work for more than 24 weeks in order to qualify under this program. So what we're doing is taking people and trying to train them in different skills. It may be that you can take that carpentry skill and use it in some other area that you hadn't before. The basic skills that you have, we'll help you do that.
Good, but would you concede to me, Madam Minister, that with 200-odd thousand unemployed in British Columbia, that everything you're doing is a Band-Aid solution with the best of intentions?
No, I don't think it's a Band-Aid. I think
can't-
it's very different, Jack, from the way that things operated in the past, where you put people to work for 10 weeks so that they could go back on unemployment insurance. What I'm trying to do is say people are going to be in courses for 6 months or a year where they get adequate training to allow them to go into a permanent job. It's a quite different approach, and we're getting the support and the interest of the private sector in helping us out with that, because it can't solely be an effort of government. It has to be a combination of the total private sector.
It's got to be a return of world trade and prosperity
Right.
and world markets for our mines and our logs, and then we'll be back to the easy old affluence where nobody had to bother 10 years ago.
Well, I think that those are the long-term goals. What I have to ensure is that people are trained to take those jobs as they emerge, as conditions worldwide change as well as domestically.
But one thing I've learned this morning from my own lack of knowledge is that go to the UIC, go to the Canada Employment Centre, inquire about these $70 million programs,
Right.
find out what you can do, and hopefully you might be able to fit into a niche and reduce the unemployment 14% in British Columbia by a smidgen. Or would you advise us to go to Ontario where things are good?
Well, no, I don't advise you. How would you ever be able to fit into Ontario? But no, what I'm saying is that obviously we're not going to be able to place everybody in jobs through the Department of Employment. What the government's responsibility is to help those most in need.
Fair enough. My thanks to Flora MacDonald, Minister of Employment and Immigration. Next, I'm going to have a free-ranging talk with one of the top free enterprises in the country and see if he's got any good news, any magic solutions for the hard-pressed people of British Columbia after the break. Adam Zimmerman, that is. Adam Zimmerman is President and Chief Executive Officer of Noranda, and that makes him also the head man in Macmillan Bloedel. Now, Mr. Zimmerman, you're noted for your outspokenness, and the last time I saw you, you were pretty depressing about the state of affairs in Canada. Now, here we are with a brand new government. Do you feel a sense of new vibrancy and recovery in Canada today?
I think that there is such a sense in some industries, and I think that those are mostly in the manufacturing industries, which, as you pointed out in the earlier section, tend to be in the central part of the country. In the resource industries, which is what I'm supposed to know about.
Well, don't even say resource industries. Let's say logging and mining.
Well, all right. Forestry and mining.
Forestry and
Forest
mining.
and mining
Forestry
industries.
and mining.
I guess I feel better now than I did a year ago because I don't think, I think that as Pogo said, we've seen the enemy and they as us, and people are understanding what the opportunity is, and there have been a lot of successes. There are tremendous successes in the way of productivity and concessions of one kind or another by suppliers such as the BC Hydro. The BC Critical Industries Commission has made it possible for us to open 2 mines which were closed a year ago.
Brenda and one other?
Medicine Bell Copper up in Grand Isle. Those are pluses. I think that there is a real feeling of cooperation between all the people devoted to an enterprise, be they hourly rated or presidents. And certainly in the companies that I have some connection with here, there are terrific gains, and I think we're going to be able to make it in the competitive struggle. It's not going to be easy. I think it involves trade-offs of maybe some form of job security in return for performance-related wages, that sort of thing. I think people understand that generally, and they're performing according to that.
Let's look at Mac and Blow specifically, of which you're the boss, the Chief Executive Officer,
No,
right?
and that's it.
What are you?
I am only the chairman. Ray Smith is the chief executive, and
You're
all
the chairman,
I do is
you're the
kibitz.
chairman of Macmillan Bloedel, and you come out here now and again. Well, you've slimmed down Macmillan Bloedel considerably. Mind you, a lot of little personal disasters for the middle management executive who thought they had jobs forever and a day. How much have you trimmed down Mac and Blow?
Well, I don't know how you quantify it, but what I can tell you is that the productivity and the throughout has varied between 20 and 40% improvements. And that implies either fewer people for the same production or more production for the same people or somewhere in between. I think that company, as all companies, have learned to live without a great deal of what is otherwise called overhead. Overhead is a luxury perhaps you can afford in very prosperous times, but in lean times it really has to get down to the fewest possible people between the president and the guy who's cutting down the tree.
Now, so unlike certain other forest companies in British Columbia, no names will pack drill, Macmillan Bloedel is sound and ready to pick up whenever the market, even more when the markets appear.
Well, I think Macmillan Bloedel is evidently picking up right now in terms of showing positive results, and I think that there will be no stopping them if the markets pick up. But I don't think that people should rely on this business of the markets picking up all the time. What we are in is a world where there is vast oversupply in all of the things that we make. It's not that demand is bad. Demand is almost at record levels, but it's oversupply throughout the world.
That doesn't make much sense. You say demand is almost at record levels, but there is oversupply. If demand's at record levels, why is there too much supply?
Well, I suppose it's been a bit of a runaway train that people have looked to so-called growth. Growth is expressed in new investment and so-called new jobs, but it happens not just in Canada, but it happens, of course, in particularly the less developed countries. And the world can now produce more copper and zinc and lumber and paper and pulp than it needs, even though the demand is, as I say, at record levels. Now, the demand is increasing rather more slowly than in the past, so it's maybe a staged thing. What it boils down to, though, I think, Jack, is that companies like I'm involved in have to learn to operate profitably at a fraction of their nameplate capacity. Nameplate is if a machine can do 100 tons an hour, maybe it ought to learn to be profitable at 85 tons an hour, and that's what we're doing throughout.
And successfully at the moment.
Very much so.
But there's one thing. You mentioned negotiations are coming up with the IWA this year, are they not?
Yes.
And throughout the forest industry.
Yes.
And you indicated that you might be able to give job security for some performance-related wages. Are you prepared to tell me what you mean by that?
Well, I think that's an issue. And yes, what I believe is that in point of fact, there are a certain number of weeks that have to be worked every year and are worked. And I think maybe that could be put in a more certain form for the employee, so that, let's say, he knows he's going to get 35 or 40 weeks' wages in the year, and that's something he can count on. I think that happens de facto anyway, and one might as well make a virtue out of necessity.
So therefore, you might be able to say, we can guarantee you, you're just talking ballpark, just talking off the top of your head, I presume, we can guarantee you 40 weeks work a year. There'll be 12 weeks when you won't work. And for that 40 weeks, we'll give you X guaranteed income.
Well, you could say that. You could also say for anything more, it would be performance related. I think it has to be tied into the notion of performance related wages. You know, a lot of people would rather work for a fraction of their present wages if they worked all year long and then get the extra bit because of success. And I think that notion has to somehow work its way into the system. And, you know, everybody may have their own opinion on this. I have a point of view, and I think it's the kind of thing that would be worked out in negotiation and discussion. But I don't think it ought to be done in terms of a battleground. I think it ought to be done in terms of we're all trying to make our way against the world, and the world is out there killing us. It's not that MB is killing Northwood or Canfor or vice versa. It's that we in the British Columbia and then in the Canadian industry are fighting the world, and we have to do it on a basis that we'll win.
More with Adam Zimmerman after the break. I mentioned the Cypress Anvil subsidies to Flora MacDonald, but I didn't go very far. Cypress Anvil is not one of your operations.
No.
How much subsidy did the government give to this competing operation of yours?
We'll never know, but it's certainly in the many millions and probably over repeated over a series of years.
And they did this for a specific reason, to preserve how many jobs?
Well, I think that they say there are 1,200 people in the Yukon who are connected with that operation.
Is that not a case, though, where the government must pour in a subsidy to keep that community alive, regardless of the fact that it will depress the prices of the minerals that it produces?
Well, it depends where your values are. It's hard to justify producing or causing extra production to feed into an already oversupplied situation. The world zinc market is oversupplied by a similar amount to Cypress Anvil's theoretical production. And certainly, the moment that announcement came, there was a significant depression in zinc markets, and any producers who were inclined to try and balance their production to the demand gave that up. And therefore, whatever jobs are added in the Yukon will, in effect, be taken away from other zinc producers.
Well, now, I know that you won't want to go into the field of politics, but do you approve of some of the steps taken by Mr. Mulroney? For instance, the sale of the Challenger plant, to which we put $750 million last year. Is that not a good thing to get rid of that drag on the taxpayer, even if it does tend to finish up with...
Well, you mean the de Havilland plant. I think you'd have to know more of the details about that, but if in fact it's the CDIC's perception that de Havilland is going to require an annual subsidy, then I guess it's good to sell it at any price. Now, the other terms that may go with that, relating to maintenance of employment or sharing of production and all those things, I don't know about, and maybe they'll be published and make it seem a better deal than it's reported in the papers this morning.
But on the overall, your overall prediction for the economy of Canada, you see some improvements, but not the recurrence of the old prosperity for many years ahead. Is that correct?
Well, you're talking about the economy of Canada, and Ms. MacDonald earlier was referring to her rosy predictions. I think it may be that the economy of Canada is getting a lot better than the resource economy. As it happens, though, British Columbia and Alberta in particular are really totally dependent on the resource economies, and that world has changed. The annual increment in demand is lessening, the increment in supply is increasing, therefore there are depressed markets. Unless we can find a way to maintain prices at a reasonable level and share the wealth better than we have in the past, it's going to be very difficult. But I think the evidence is in that we can do it if we collectively marshal the will to do it, and it's certainly in evidence in the companies I know about.
But what do you mean share the wealth? Do you mean share the wealth with the employees?
Yeah, well, I think everybody's sharing the wealth. I mean, you can't just charge 12% more per annum for municipal taxes or 8% more per annum for hydropower, and you can't get annual wage increases, and you can't get salary increases, and you have to share what's there. There's still a lot there. It just has to be shared. Well,
now, you mentioned sharing, and I won't pin you to any negotiations in British Columbia next year, but you said I presume you were thinking off the top of the head, or are you flying a kite?
Well, I suppose it's a bit of both, because I think a lot of people, or maybe most people, disagree with my notion, and it may be a wrong one, but I would certainly be prepared. See, I think that the ideal system is where everybody feels they're working for themselves. If you're working for yourself, you are taking the ups and the downs. So that I think that what we have to strive for in these big industrial organizations is have employees feel that way. So they have to feel they have a vested interest and that somebody can't lop them off tomorrow morning. So you have to give, they have to have some feeling of security. On the other hand, the employer, if he's going to make all sorts of capital expenditures, if he's going to have market plans and so on, he can't count on work stoppages. He's got to, and excessive wages. He's got to be able to count on some sort of participative reward system.
Well, no, you don't get away from me. Some sort of guarantee for the man working for himself, even under the orbit of his union, and a performance-related wage.
That's right.
Now, by performance-related wage, could I say, if the firm makes a profit, his wages go up. If the firm makes a loss, his wages go down.
That's fair. Yes. That's a simple notion. I think the working of it becomes more complicated.
So
also, there's a lot of that already in terms of these productivity bonuses and so on in the logging. That's harder to do in a process.
Harder to do in a plant. Easy enough to do when you can measure the number of trees a guy has knocked down. So what we're really talking is about the Zimmerman plan.
That's right.
The Zimmerman,
next time we'll have to have it with Jack Monroe and Art Gruntman.
Zimmerman plan for job security plus PRW, profit-related wages.
Perfect. I like that.
But the trouble with you big businessmen, I've got to put it to you bluntly, you've been too late and too slow in coming to this, haven't you?
Well, hindsight is 20/20, and I suppose that, coming to this, I don't know that we're coming to this. I think that the negotiating system in these major industries here has not served everybody very well in recent years. So I guess it's businessmen's fault.
Mr. Zimmerman, it's been a tribal dance every year.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not talking just about us, but you people as management and they as unions, you go through this bleeding tribal dance every year until you come head on, back off, and finally settle. Don't you?
Yes, I think that's right.
And it's been awful, hasn't it?
It's a quaint custom that would be nice to change.
Would you work for profit-related wages for a big outfit after the break? Well, Adam Zimmerman of Noranda does have a word or two of a positive attitude, in that you think that we're on the go, providing we stay slim, trim, and efficient, right?
Yes. I think we've proven it can be done.
But our old tradition, you've proven you can done, say, in Macmillan Burdell or elsewhere in your operations, but we still need world markets. Do we need free trade?
Well, as far as the resource industries go, we've really operated in a free trade environment, and I think that if these free trade negotiations maintain that for us, yes, we do need it.
So you don't pay tariffs on copper, zinc, or whatnot leaving the country?
No, there were some, but it's not, no.
Go ahead to Mr. Zimmerman.
Yes, I would like to think that the wages I made would relate to how I do my job and how efficiently I do it and how hard I work. But that's not the way it would work. It would what I would get paid would depend more on how the managers did their job and the people above me and the people in charge of the company and the decisions they made. That would affect my wages far more, and I wouldn't be responsible for that.
Well, I suppose that's true in a sort of a way, but in the best of worlds, if you are in a position as though you're running your own business and if you have good management, things ought to work out for you. There has to be a boss somewhere.
Well, there has to be a boss, but I mean, I would bet you almost in any industry, the employees can take a look at it and come up with all sorts of better ideas how to do things.
Well, I think that's right, and I think I think management today is cognizant of that and is paying a lot of attention to it. The fact of the matter is, though, that the enterprise has to survive, and therefore your wages have to relate to the progress of the enterprise.
I think it'd probably do you a world of good to get down.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut him off so bluntly.
Well, to get down, I think I know what you're going to say. I can only tell you that I try and visit one of our plants a week so that I try to understand what people are thinking.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack?
Yes.
Yes, in the issue of profit-related wages, I am most certainly agreeable to that. I am a faller on the coast. I have worked for M&B in the past. I currently work on a contract basis, just myself and my saws, directly related to profit-related wages. However, I don't feel that the majority of the working man is willing to do that, because I do believe that he is very complacent and wants the assurance of a good wage, but without any of the responsibilities. Because it seems to me that in the past, it is changing slowly, but in the past, Mondays was a hangover day and Fridays are a government day, and it seemed that Wednesdays was the only production day.
Well,
that attitude
I think I should just
clarify.
When I say performance-related wages, I think certainly a fraction of wages have to be firm, 60, 75%. It's the remainder that I think should be performance-related.
As an example, we used to work contract back in 1972, and the company is the one that wanted the fallers in particular to go on to a day wage. And I'm pretty sure, in all honesty, that they'll have to admit that they made a big mistake in that respect.
Goodbye. Go ahead, please.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm 53 years old, mother of 4, grandmother of 5. Hello.
Yes, yes.
Did you hear me?
Yes, yes.
And I'll take a job anywhere, at any wage at all.
Thank you, ma'am. Sorry, we can't offer you one. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I agree with the idea of balancing it out and having everybody get equality for what they do. I would also like to see management get paid according to what has happened too. I don't think management should be in such a high income bracket while the employees are such a low income bracket. It's not communistic what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about fair play.
Well, you should read the article. It's in the Globe and Mail this morning. There's a survey done by one of the consulting firms which says that Canadian managers get about half what American managers do, but about 2/3 of American managers get most of their, or a lot of their wage through bonus, and Canadians don't take it that way.
Would the books then be open to the public as well then?
I think the books are open to the public.
Exactly where the company stands, so the profit.
Yeah, you've got a mistaken idea of what managers get. I mean, there are very few managers in the country that get more than a shortstop in the Blue Jays. You don't object to any of that. These managers are scarce people, and they are paid usually according to a rating system that, I think is fair and is intended to be fair.
I must admit, you fooled me there. I have no earthly idea what a shortstop in the Blue Jays gets. Have you?
Well, yes. Well, I know what the average baseball player gets on the Toronto Blue Jays. The average baseball player, I think it gets $208,000. So, that's a heck of a lot more than almost any manager gets.
Yeah, well, I know what the average Canuck gets.
I don't know.
It's about $100,000. Go ahead, please.
A couple of callers have expressed support for profit sharing, but are concerned about responsibility for it. And I wondered how Mr. Zimmerman feels about giving employees representation on the board so they can share that responsibility and equity in the company, either through their pension plan or some form of stock ownership plan?
I think it's fine, but I think that the management should also be represented in the union. But given that, I don't see any possible reason. I mean, I'm an employee just like anybody else is. I have no divided loyalty, though, and I guess that's what maybe changes it. I think that's been the issue. But, you know, my experience is that employees think just as just as devoted and sensible a way as any directors do, on the whole.
Except for the inherent mistrust in the relationship between management and employees.
Well, I don't know whether maybe employees mistrust management, but I can tell you the management that I have connection with certainly does not mistrust employees. There may be individuals who are, you know, clearly troublemakers, but on the whole, we're all in this together.
Okay, we're all in this together till the end of the program with Adam Zimmerman of Noranda after the break. Victoria, Adam Zimmerman is President and CEO of Noranda and Chairman of the Board of Macmillan Bledel, and runs another 30 or 40 operations, logging, mining, manufacturing plants across the country, employing how many people, roughly speaking?
I think our count right now is 32,000.
32,000. You're a fairly significant employer of labor in this country, Mr. Noranda, Mr. Zimmerman. Go ahead from Victoria.
Yeah. Good morning, Jack.
Yes.
I'm calling. I want to speak to Mr. Zimmerman.
Right.
I was wondering what if he has any plans for job creation for some of the loggers in this province. And I was wondering if he could, at all, get a hold of the minister who was just on earlier and sit across the board from her and give each other excuses why they can't get the boys back into the woods. I'll hang up and wait for his answer.
Well, I do not think that I could describe any of our plans as being for job creation. I think that what we are trying to do is secure our enterprise so that the jobs that we can offer are a sure thing. Creating jobs, or job creation occurs only because of the markets, and I think I described the markets earlier. The fact of the matter is that with the growing intelligence of machinery, ability to be more productive, that probably there are fewer man-hours available and going to be available in some of these traditional categories like you mentioned.
Go ahead, please.
Is that me, Jack?
Yep.
I used to work for Quebec here in Trail in the maintenance section, and my question for Mr. Zimmerman is that how would you be able to rate your work productivity when you're on maintenance, especially when there's so many other different trades involved and you don't want to step in each other's shoes, and the different supervisors that are handling each different part of the trade?
Well, I think that that sort of system would probably be cutting it too fine. Really, I think you have to do it on the health of the overall enterprise and the result of the overall enterprise, of which maintenance is, of course, a vital part. Now, some of these programs, bonus programs or profit-sharing programs, cut it three ways. They cut it to the unit that the individual is working in your case, the maintenance department, the division of the company in which he's working, which might have been the trail smelter, and then the company as a whole, which in your case would have been Cameco. But I think in practical terms, they have to relate to the affairs of the company as a whole.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I'm an IWA member, and I work at a profitable M&B logging division. And to make it profitable, what has happened is we work a shorter year. Now, my point is for performance-related wages, there's a certain quota involved. If I work harder, we reach the quota sooner, and then I work less. I'd like to hear Adam Zimmerman's comments on this.
Well, what I meant by performance-related wages, I really mean financial performance. You know, does the company make money at the end of the year, more or less money? That's really what's divided. Now, it may be that you can work 20% less and the company make 10% more, that sort of equation. And I'm simply saying you ought to share in that.
You're saying that the performance-related wages are the, in fact, profit-related wages is a better nomenclature.
I think that's probably right, yes.
Because the more the money, the more you'd kick back to the employees.
Yes, well, as this chap says, and I mentioned earlier, there are a number of quota-related remuneration schemes, and they are not what I'm talking about.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, good morning, Jack. Mr. Zimmerman. I'd recommend to everyone to pick up the Globe and Mail this morning on Section B2 about Canadian executives in this PRW plan. How does Mr. Zimmerman expect the working stiff to adopt a performance-related wage when the very executives at the top branches of these firms won't even go for it?
Yeah.
My question in regards, I think everyone should take a look at that, even the contract loggers. Jack, you've probably got it in front of you.
But did you notice in that that same article said that Canadians get about half what the Americans do on the performance-related?
Oh, absolutely.
So that probably argues.
Also, did you happen to notice that the very first paragraph says that Canadian chief executive officers believe that a bird in the hand is really worth two in the bush, at least when it comes to the paycheck.
Yeah.
So, this is a Canadian phenomenon, I think, where we're all like to be nice and safe and secure, and I can't argue with it. But I've got a question here. When it comes to, you were talking that you explained the market system and everything, and even Jack had a hard time kind of following your logic on it, and you're having a hard time explaining it. But we're talking about productivity. I noticed in the Globe and Mail report on business that all of a sudden Conrad Black and these Andrew Campbell, these management executives, all of a sudden they're starting to beat on the workers. It's almost looking like an orchestrated media campaign on beating on the workers this time around.
I gotta go. Had to cut him there because of time. But you're not noted for beating on the workers, are you? You want to share the profits with the workers.
Yes.
My thanks to Adam Zimmerman. Next time he comes back, he'll be full of good, glowing good news. Won't you?
Yeah, of course.
And I'll be back after the break. Yuppies. The Queen of Country Punk will be here tomorrow by the name of the wonderful Katie Lang at 9 a.m. precisely.